She asked for scraps and a corner to sleep. But the rich rancher's daughter called her mama before the week was over. Colorado high country, winter of 1878. I can sleep in the barn. I just need to stay warm. Please. The tone was firm yet composed. A lady lingered amid the drifts, her mantle ripped and drenched. Her face bore the flush of exposure to the elements, mouth almost violet from the freeze. Wisps of ebony locks stuck to her skin, and frost coated the edges of her gown. Willie Wren remained still. One palm rested on the entry handle, the other close to the firearm tucked by the garment hook. He had swung open the portal, anticipating a predator or an intruder, not an individual scarcely upright. Her exhalations formed clouds in the chill. She embraced herself not from terror, but as if determined to weather the darkness. I won't accept handouts, she continued. Merely a spot that's sheltered from the damp. He nearly closed the barrier. Willie avoided welcoming outsiders. Not after the season his spouse passed. Not after the external realm had demonstrated its harshness, making compassion a risky bet. Then emerged the tiny utterance from within. He pivoted. Rose, at 4 summers, her sleeping attire grazing the planks, uncovered toes rosy against the icy wood. She peered at the figure on the veranda. "Mama," she uttered once more. "She's not your mother, Rose," Willie murmured softly. Rose furrowed her brow. "But she smells like the dream I had." The woman flinched barely, her lips parted, but she said nothing. Willie looked at her again, blood at her boot's edge. Frostbitten hands, but her back was straight, her chin lifted. Hesegid, jaw tight. "There's straw in the far corner of the barn," he said. She nodded like a soldier receiving orders. She didn't thank him. She didn't look relieved. She only stepped inside briefly, warming her hands by the fire. Red and cracked, her fingers trembled from the cold. Her eyes lingered on Rose. Then she turned and walked out into the night. Willie watched her make her way across the snow-blind yard. Her steps were slow, but her posture didn't bend. Her footprints vanished behind her almost instantly. He shut the door. Rose stood nearby, still staring. "Go tubed," Willie murmured. "She's cold," Rose whispered. "She's not your mama." "She didn't say she wasn't." Willie crouched and lifted his daughter. She curled into his chest, warm and real, but her gaze drifted toward the window. "She was in my dream," she whispered. "Dreams aren't always true, but some are." He said nothing. Upstairs, he tucked Heron, waited until her breath slowed, until the wind outside became part of the silence. Then he returned to his chair, 2 more logs into the fire. The wind howled at the windows. He thought about the woman's face, not her beauty, but her stubbornness. The way she stood, soaked and shaking, but not begging, not pleading. She had not asked to be rescued, only to survive. His eyes drifted to the window. He could just make out the shape of the barn through the snow. She was out there now, somewhere between the horses and the hay, unknown and unclaimed, in a place where softness freezes and strangers stay. Strangers, one word. "Mama, cut deeper than the wind. If your chest ached just a little, tap the hype button and walk with us into what comes next." Willie stared at the fire, but his thoughts lingered elsewhere. He had seen men beg for gold, for warmth, for forgiveness, but never a woman ask only for straw and a corner to sleep, then disappear into the storm with her head held high. He looked at the rifle, then at the flames, then finally back to the barn. She hadn't left, not yet, and Rosa still dreamed. Snow continued to fall through the night, blanketing the world in white and silence. In the barn, beneath a wool blanket and a pile of old straw, the stranger slept, curled like Achilled, her breath shallow but steady. The frost crept along the windows, but inside the barn remained just warm enough, thanks to the small mercy Willie had allowed himself. He had said nothing when he returned to the house, but he did add a few extra logs to the fire. Not for himself, not even for Rose, but so the barn, by proximity, would catch just a little of the heat radiating from the chimney wall. Willie sat in the rocker by the fire, boots crossed, arms folded, pretending not to listen to the wind anymore. When morning finally broke, pale and still, the woman emerged from the barn with snow on her shoulders and silence on her lips. Her dress was still damp, her fingers red, but she stood straight as if sleep alone had mended her. Willie met her on the porch, coffee in hand. "You're up early," he said more gruffly than he intended. I did not sleep much, she replied. He studied her for a moment. She didn't fidget, didn't smile or beg. What's your name? She hesitated, then looked down at her hands. I think it's Mira, she said softly. That's all I remember. Oh, she nodded. The rest's gone. Amnesia or lies? Willie could not tell. He had seen both before. But when Rose ran to Mira without a trace of fear and wrapped her arms around the woman's waist, he knew the situation had just gotten more complicated. Willie didn't like complications. Not since the avalanche that took his wife. Not since he decided to raise his daughter alone, far from town, from questions, from pain. But now Mira stood in his yard, and his daughter was smiling in a way he'd not seen in months. She's just cold, Rose, Willie warned. Let her rest. I like her, Rose said, face half hidden in Mira's skirt. Mira placed a gentle hand on the child's head. I will earn my keep, she said to Willie, if I can stay a little while. He didn't answer, but he didn't tell her to leave. By midday, Mira had already swept the front porch, shoveled a path from the barn to the well, and cleaned the dishes from breakfast with a rhythm that suggested muscle memory more than training. She didn't ask questions. She didn't chatter. She simply worked, and Rose followed her everywhere. By the third evening, it was clear the child would no longer sleep unless Mira was nearby. She refused supper without Mira's hand resting on her shoulder, and she cried when Willie tried to tuck her in alone. You sure she ain't bewitched her? He grumbled under his breath as he watched Mira carefully braid Rose's hair. Not a witch, Rose said, overhearing. She's just safe, safe. Willie didn't know what the woman really was. But he did know that his daughter, who used to scream at the sound of wind since her mother's death, now sang quietly to herself as she helped Mira dry tin plates. One night, as the fire burned low, Willie passed the open door to the pantry and caught sight of Mira brushing her damp dress near the stove. She had pulled her braid to one side, revealing the back of her neck. There, just beneath the edge of her collar, was a scar, thin and pale but unmistakable. A bullet wound. Willie's eyes narrowed. He stepped away before she saw him watching, his boots echoing too loudly in the quiet hall. That night, he lay awake longer than usual. The woman with no past, the child calling her mama, and now a scar that whispered of violence. Still, when he got up to check the barn one more time, he found himself bringing an extra blanket and a kettle of warm water just in case. A week passed, then another. The snow fell, melted, and fell again. Mira remained, folding into the rhythm of the ranch like a leaf pressed into an old book, unfamiliar, but somehow meant to be there. She still remembered nothing beyond her name, but her hands remembered chores. Her feet knew their way around icy trails. Her voice, though quiet, carried calm. Rose clung to her with fierce devotion, and Willie watched with a mix of unease and reluctant peace. He still slept lightly, a rifle always within reach. But each time he looked out the window and saw a mirror hauling firewood or lifting Rose onto the porch rail so she could see the sunrise, that edge in his chest dulled just a little more. Then the knock came. It was a Tuesday morning, clear and cold. Willie had just saddled his mare when he saw two horses climbing therrage, both riders wrapped in dust-colored coats, their hats pulled low, strangers from town. He stepped onto the porch as they dismounted. One was the blacksmith's boy, grown now, but still heavy-buted and blunted. The other was a wiry man with a face like sun-dried leather. Sheriff's deputy. Morning, the deputy said, tipping his hat. Willie ran right. Willie nodded once. We heard tell there's a woman staying up here. Said she came out of nowhere. Got a scar behind her ear. Willie crossed his arms. She's helping out. Watches the girl. The deputy raised an eyebrow. Might be Theone we're looking for? There's a bounty out on a woman fits her description. Armed, dangerous, slippery as a cat in snow. Willie did not flinch. You seen anything off? The deputy pressed. A mark on her neck, maybe. Willie's jaw worked. His eyes drifted past them toward the barn where Mira stood holding Rose's hand, showing her how to split kindling. No one like that here, Willie said flatly. You sure? I am. The blacksmith's boy squinted. Folks say she's dangerous. Willie stepped down off the porch. This land's mine, he said. That means I decide who's dangerous. The words hung in the air like a drawn gun. Neither man replied. After a few moments, they mounted their horses and rode back down the trail, their curiosity half satisfied, but their warning delivered. Inside, Mira stood by the sink, drying her hands. Heary's met Willie's, searching his face. They were asking about me, were they not? Willie nodded slowly. And you lied. I did not see any reason to tell them otherwise. She looked away, lips pressed tight. You saw the scar, she said. I know you did. I saw it, then why? He looked at her for a long time. Because a scar does not tell me who you are. It only tells me you survived something. Mira sat down on the edge of the table bench, hands clasped. Her voice trembled. What if I am dangerous, Willie? What if I just forgot what I did? Willie knelt beside her, slow and solid like the earth shifting. Then we will find out, he said. But I will not let someone else write that story for you. For the first time since she arrived, Mira looked like she might cry. Not out of fear or grief, but relief. Rose came running in with a snowflake melting in her palm. Mama, she whispered, holding up the tiny miracle. It's for you. Mira took the snowflake and smiled, though it vanished in her hand. Something inside her steadied. Even if she did not know her past, this moment was real, and for now that was enough. The wind howled down the pass like a beast in pain. Snow whispered across the windows, scratching like fingers made of ice. It was past midnight when Willie woke to the sound of crying. He sat up instantly, heart pounding. Rose, he called into the darkness. The child's voice answered, soft and broken. She is gone. Willie lit the lamp, eyes scanning the room. Mira's bedroll in the corner was empty. The barn door, he noticed, through the frosted window, swung half open in the wind. Stay inside, he told Rose. Do not open the door no matter what. She nodded, curling into the quilt with wide, wet eyes. Willie grabbed his coat and rifle and stepped out into the storm. Snowflakes stung his cheeks. He looked down and found what he hoped to see. Footprints. Small, hurried, half-blown over by wind. But there, leading away from the barn, heading up their edge, he followed. Each step was harder than the last. The slope steepened and the trail grew thinner. Trees leaned against the sky like old men huddled for warmth. His boots crunched on ice and his breath steamed in clouds. He climbed higher past the trapline, past the place his wife had once loved to sit in summer. Then he saw her. Mira stood at the edge of a snow-covered bluff, her coat flapping open, hair tangled in the wind. The moonlight caught her face, pale, tear-stray. He stopped 10 yards behind her. Mira. She flinched but did not turn. You should not be here, she said quietly. You should not either. Silence. The wind moaned again. I woke up and I could not breathe, she said finally. Everything is heavy. I keep thinking, what if the man in town was right? What if I did something terrible and forgot? What if I do not deserve this second chance? Willie took a step closer. And what if you did not? What if you were good and brave and someone lied? She turned slightly enough for him to see the doubt carved deep in her eyes. I do not even know my own name, she whispered. What kind of person forgets who they are? The kind that lived through hell and kept going. Her shoulders shook. I am tired, Willie, so tired. Maybe it would be easier for everyone if I just do not say that. He cut in. She closed her eyes. If I do not know who I am, maybe I do not deserve to be here. He walked forward slow but certain until he was close enough to touch her. Then stay until you do, he said, his voice like stone warmed by fire. Or until Rose believes you are her mother for good. That made her cry. Not loudly, just one soft sob that escaped like breath from a broken heart. Willie reached out, his hand gentle as he pulled her back from the edge. She did not resist. Her body collapsed against his chest, all bone and fear and cold. He wrapped his arms around her and held her tight. I am not asking you to be perfect, he murmured. Just stay. That is all. She nodded against him. The stars above were hard and bright, watching. For a long time they stood there, man and woman, broken and still whole, on the edge of the world, and then together they walked down from the ridge, step by step toward warmth, toward light, toward a home that waited for them both. The snow had softened by morning. Sunlight spilled pale and cold across the mountains, casting long blue shadows over the drifts. Mira stood at the window, her breath fogging the glass as she stared out across the pass. Something about the silence stirred unease in her chest, like a word she once knew but had forgotten. Behind her, Willie was mending a saddle strap at the kitchen table. Rose hummed quietly as she traced her finger across a wooden puzzle piece. I dreamed about paper last night, Mira said suddenly. Willie looked up. Paper? He asked. She nodded slowly. Envelopes sealed with wax. Maps, too, hand-drawn, ink still fresh. I was holding them, guarding them. He said nothing, but his hands still. I do not know why I remembered, she continued, but it felt real, like I had done it many times. You think it was before the snow? Yes, long before. She turned to face him. There was also a name. Willie waited. Langston, she said. Mira Langston. Willie breathed out slowly, tasting the name. I believe that is mine. He nodded once. It sounds right. That afternoon, she found an old trunk in the attic while helping Willie search for Rose's mittens. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, were yellowed letters tied with red string. She pulled one open, fingers trembling. The handwriting danced across the page in slanted ink to Miss Mara Langston. Thank you for the safe passage. We reached the northern line before dawn. My brother owes you his life. A shudder ran through her. More letters followed. Words of thanks. Names she did not recognize. Mentions of deliveries and coordinates. Willie stood beside her, reading over her shoulder. You were a courier, he said, during the war. Mara nodded slowly. I think so. I carried messages, slipped between camps, rode at night, sometimes in disguise. Dangerous work. It was worth it then. Was her hand tightened around one letter. One mission went wrong. I remember the cold. The wagon wheels stuck in mud. The sound of gunshots. Someone shouted my name. Then everything turned black. Someone betrayed you, Willie said. I think so. I was left behind. Maybe they thought I was dead. Maybe someone wanted you to be. Mara's jaw clenched. That is why I had the scar. Not because I hurt someone, because someone tried to silence me. She looked at Willie, something burning behind her eyes. I was not a criminal. I was a survivor. Willie held her gaze. Then he nodded once. You risked your life for words on paper, he asked quietly. I believed in a cause, she said, until it nearly killed me. He looked down at the letter in her hands. Maybe it saved someone too. Mara folded the pages carefully and returned them to the trunk. She felt taller as she stood, not stronger, just more whole, like pieces of herself had come back, just enough to stand steady. That night, while the fire burned low and Rose slept with her small hand wrapped around Mira's braid, Willie sat beside the hearth. You still believe in that cause? He asked. Mira looked at him. I do not know, but I believe in truth and in second chances. He nodded. So do I. The snowstorm passed overnight, leaving a heavy silence over the valley. The trees bent low under the weight, and the chimney smoke from Willie's ranch curled upward into a sky so clear it looked painted. It was mid-morning when the sound of hooves broke the stillness. Willie stepped out onto the porch, rifles slung loosely over his shoulder. An old man on horseback approached the gate, his back straight despite his years, eyes sharp beneath a fur-lined hat. You, Wren? The man called. Willie nodded. That's right. The old man dismounted with surprising ease, brushing snow from his coat. I'm Amos Grady. Used to run the Western Pass back in the war, stationed at Red Elk Ridge. Willie's brows drew together. That was over 20 years ago. Still remember the faces that mattered, Amos said. I heard Mara Langston was here. I need to see her. Willie hesitated. Why? Amos pulled something from inside his coat. A leather pouch, worn and creased. He handed it to Willie. She saved my brother's life. He was trapped behind the line near Fort Kendrick, shot in the leg, couldn't walk. She got him out before the rebels closed in. Carried him on her back 1/2 mile uphill through sleet. Willie opened the pouch. Inside was a folded letter, brittle with age. She was more than a runner, Amos said. She was legend. Mara came to the door just then, drawn by the voices. She froze when she saw Amos. His eyes widened. Einstein, he breathed. It's really you. I don't remember you, she said, voice cautious. He smiled gently. That's all right. You did enough for us, even if you never remember a damn thing again. He reached out, took her hand, pressed it between his. My brother named his first daughter after you, Mira. Hestel keeps your portrait near the mantel. Mira blinked, stunned. I had a portrait. It was sketched by a Union captain. Said he wanted to remember the woman who rode faster than death. She lawed softly, almost in disbelief. Amos glanced toward Willie. There's more. I found a letter recently tucked inside a box of old maps. It's from your wife. Willie stiffened. Eliza? She wrote to Mira. He handed Mira the second paper. She opened it slowly, fingers trembling. The ink was faded, but the handwriting was strong, elegant. Dearest Mara, your last letter reached me on the edge of winter. The things you've risked for others, they humble me. I miss our late night talks in Lexington before the world burned. If ever you need shelter, come west. My husband is kind, and the land here is wide. You will always have a place by my fire. Tears welled in Mira's eyes. She wrote this for me. Willie nodded. She must have sent it right before the blizzard that took her. For a long moment, none of them spoke. Then Willie stepped inside and returned with a small wooden box. He opened it slowly and lifted out a silver medal shaped like a dove with spread wings, edges worn smooth by time. This washer's, he said. Eliza's. He looked at Mira, his voice thick. She trusted you, and now I do too. He reached out and placed the medal gently in her palm. Mira closed her fingers around it, her shoulders trembling. I do not know what I did to deserve this, she whispered. You survived, Willie said, and you came back. Outside, the wind shifted, brushing snow from the eaves. Inside, something deeper settled, not silence, but peace. The morning was still when Mira packed her things. The snow had begun to soften in the late spring thaw, but the air was restless. Clouds gathered low across the mountains, promising wind, a change. She stood near the barn with a small satchel slung over her shoulder, her coat buttoned to the throat. Her eyes lingered on the house one last time. Inside, she had known warmth, laughter, a place at the table, but it was not hers. It had never been hers. She heard the creak of the front door, then a small, frantic voice. Mama! Mara turned. Rose came running across the yard in bare feet and a nightdress, hair tangled from sleep, eyes swollen with tears. Don't go, Mama, please. Mira dropped the satchel and knelt, catching the child in her arms. Rose clung to her like she would never let go again. I'm not your mother, Rose, Mira whispered, her voice catching. Yes, you are, Rose sobbed. I don't care what anyone says. I picked you. I prayed for you. Mira's heart broke into pieces right there in the dirt. She held the girl tight, rocking her gently. Willie's boots came into view a moment later, thewing softly through the wet earth. He stood there watching them, his face unreadable. Then, without a word, he stepped forward. Come on, sweetheart, he said to Rose, his voice low and steady. Go back inside. I'll talk to her. Rose shook her head, still gripping Mira's coat. Willie crouched beside them and looked his daughter in the eyes. Rose, he said gently, sometimes love needs a little space to find its way. Can you trust me with that? The little girl sniffled, looked at Mira one last time, and slowly nodded. Willie picked her up, kissed her forehead, and carried her back toward the house. Mara watched until they disappeared inside. Then she turned to retrieve her bag, but Willie was there blocking the path. He held something small in his hand, wrapped in cloth. I was going to wait, he said, voice thick, but I think we're out of time for waiting. He unwrapped the cloth. Inside was a silver ring, simple, hand-forged, with a small engraving of the mountain ridge behind their home. A delicate line cut into the band like a horizon. I made this for Eliza when I first bought the land, he said. But she never liked jewelry, said the mountain was enough. He paused. I've been carrying it around for years. Didn't know why I kept it. Mara said nothing, only stared. Willie stepped closer. You asked for scraps and a corner to sleep, he said. But you gave more than you took. You filled the cracks in this place, in Rose, in me. She opened her mouth, but no sound came. He dropped to knee, the ring in his palm. I want to give you more than warmth, he said softly. I want to give you a home as my wife. The wind picked up behind them, brushing hair from Mira's face. She looked down at the ring, then at Willie, then past him toward the cabin where a little girl watched through a frosted window. Tears burned in her eyes. You know who I used to be, she said. You know what I have run from? He nodded. And I know who you are now. I still don't remember everything. I do not need everything. I just need you. Her breath shook as she reached for his hand. Yes, she whispered. Willie slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit, not perfectly, but it fit like something made to be worn by a woman who had walked through snow, silence, and fire. He stood. They held each other in the fading gray light, the wind rising around them like a promise, and from the window, Rose pressed her hands to the glass and whispered, I knew she would say yes. 1 year had passed since the snow fell thick over the Wren homestead. The seasons had changed slowly, like an old horse finding its way home. Spring had brought the melt, summer the green, and now autumn colored the pines with gold and rust. But the biggest change wasn't the land. It was the little building perched on the southern ridge. It used to be a storehouse half rotten and full of old tools. Now it was a school. Inside, children from miles around, sons and daughters of trappers, ranch hands, traders, sat on benches built from reclaimed timber. They dipped ink pens into jars and recited from weather-worn readers. They learned letters and numbers and stories about faraway places they might never see. And they listened when the woman at the front of the room spoke. Her voice was clear, measured, gentle, but never fragile. Miss Mira, they called her. Mara Langston had traded her saddlebag for a blackboard, her fear for purpose. Her hair was pinned up now, though Willie often teased it down again by the fire. She wore soft dresses stitched by her own hands in a silver ring engraved with the shape of the mountain where her life had begun again. Most days the children came early, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. Some brought apples or pine cones, others just stories. All of them brought noise. And Mira, who once feared the sound of her own memory, welcomed it. Each morning she walked to the ridge with a tin lunchbox and a book under her arm. Each evening she returned with chalk dust on her sleeves and stories for the dinner table. Willie met her at the gate, always. He had rebuilt the barn that spring, carving designs into the beams, horses, wildflowers, stars. He taught Rose how to shape animals from pine scraps. Her favorite was the fox, crooked and lopsided, but proud. I call him Baldy, she said, tucking it into her bed each night. Their home was quiet, but never silent. It was full with the smell of wood smoke and bread, with the hum of laughter and tools, with the voice of a girl who had once only whispered to the wind. One night, near the end of October, Mira tucked Rose into bed and sat beside her. The child's hair had grown longer. She smelled of sawdust and blackberry jam. "Will you tell me the dream again?" Rose asked. Mira smiled. "The one where you knew?" Rose nodded. "You were cold," Mira said softly, brushing a lock of hair from the girl's cheek. "And the snow was falling, and you knocked on a door, not mine, but I opened it anyway. And you said, 'Ik knew you would come.'" Rose beamed, pulling the quilt to her chin. "I knew you were my mama," she whispered, eyes fluttering. "Even before you did," Mara's throat tightened. She kissed the girl's forehead, lingered a moment longer, then stood out on the porch. The stars were waking. Willie sat on the steps, carving another fox from a block of wood. He looked up when she joined him and handed her the half-finished piece. "You'll want to fix the ears," he said. "I never get them right." Mira laughed quietly, turning the figure in her hands. They sat like that for a while, shoulder to shoulder, listening to the mountain breathe. "I saw a new child today," she said, "just riding with her father. Might be old enough by spring." Willie nodded. "You think you'll have room?" "I'll make room," she said. "Every child deserves a place to learn, a place to feel safe." Hep put his arm around her. "You made one for all of us." Mara rested her head on his shoulder. The wind moved gently around them, carrying the scent of pine and the promise of the coming snow. Below them, in a valley that once only held silence, laughter rose faintly from the trees. The sound of a family that had come together not by blood, but by choice, and above them in a schoolhouse lit by lantern light. The chalkboard waited for morning, and the next name, Mara Langston, would teach to write. Out here in the wide and windswept West, love does not always arrive with flowers or fanfare. Sometimes it comes with snow on your shoulders and no memory of who you are, only the hope that someone might still open their door. Mara did not ask for much, just scraps and a corner to sleep. But she found a daughter's arms, a rancher's heart, and a future shaped not by the past, but by choice, by courage, and by quiet love that grew steady as the mountain winds. If this story touched something deep in you, if it reminded you that even in the coldest places, warmth finds its way in, we invite you to stay a while. Subscribe to Wild West Love Stories for more tales of second chances, found families, and the kind of love that doesn't just survive, it builds a home.